public hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriation and Adjudication will now come to order. Notice of the public hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on February the 27th, 2015, with a second notice provided on March the 7th. Notice the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. There are two bills on the agenda for this evening. As chairman, I'll call it out of order, hoping that there'll be more people to testify on the other bill, but since one representative from the AG's office is here on the second bill, I will call Bill 41-33 first, which was introduced at the request of the Attorney General's office, and I think their testimony will be self-explanatory without a sponsor statement.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Perez. I'm the Deputy Attorney General for the Child Support Enforcement Division of the Attorney General's office. I'm here to put on the record our support for Bill 4133 regarding Chapter 35 of Title V, Guam Code Annotated, the Uniform Interstate Family Support Act. Attorney General Barrett Anderson has submitted written testimony regarding this today. Did you want me to read that into the record? Okay. From a letter dated March 9th, 2015, regarding the bill that I had mentioned earlier, Dear Vice Speaker Cruz, the Office of the Attorney General fully supports and encourages the passage of Bill 41-33 regarding Chapter 35 of Title V, Guam Code Annotated. The bill will repeal and reenact the Uniform Interstate Family Support Act, in other words, USA, to include amendments made in 2008, which incorporate the provisions of the 2007 Hague Convention on the International Recovery of Child Support and Other Forms of Family Maintenance, also known as the Convention. In both its current and proposed forms, UFSA provides uniform rules for the enforcement of family support orders across different jurisdictions. The 2008 amendments are intended to improve the enforcement of American child support orders abroad and to ensure that children residing in the U.S. receive financial support from parents wherever the parents reside. The amendments also provide procedures for foreign support orders from countries that are parties to the Convention. A statement of the Uniform Law Commission encouraging the adoption of UFSA 2008 amendments is enclosed for your review. In addition to the general goal of ensuring that children receive financial support from parents, passage of Bill 41-33 is necessary to ensure Guam continues to receive federal support for our child support program. The U.S. Office of Child Support Enforcement, Administration of Children and Families, has issued guidance regarding the adoption of the 2008 UFSA amendments. OCSE Action Transmittal AT-14-11, issued October 9, 2014, and enclosed here, describes the requirement for each U.S. state and territory to adopt the amendments. Specifically, Section 466F of the Social Security Act, amended in September 2014, requires all states to adopt the UFSA 2008 amendments. Adoption of the UFSA 2000 amendments is required by April 1, 2015. For these reasons, I respectfully request that each senator vote in favor of Bill 41-33 so that the UFSA 2008 amendments may be enacted into Guam law. Sincerely, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson.
Thank you very much. I just want to have you underscore a couple of points in your testimony. Region 9 is requesting that this be passed by April the 1st, as in like 3 weeks from today?
Indeed. The attachment from the Office of Child Support Enforcement, Region 9, oversees us as part of their region, the Western region. That action transmittal indicated that the law has to be in effect, quote, in every state, quote, no later than the effective date of laws enacted by the legislature of the state implementing such paragraph, but in no event later than the first day of the first calendar quarter, beginning after the close of the first regular session of the state legislature that begins after the date of the enactment of this act. So, what it was is that on September 29, 2014, the Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act was put into law in the U.S. That amended the Social Security Act, specifically for Section 466F, which requires us to adopt UFSA. If we take the fact that the legislative session began in January, April 1st is the first day of the quarter after the beginning of that session, and that's how we came to the April 1st deadline.
And how much would we lose if we don't get it passed by then?
Oh, well, currently they fund 66% of our budget. And so in there, they don't put a number to it, but they do say our federal funding would be jeopardized, and that's mentioned in the attachments. And it said all states have to enact UFSA 2008 verbatim. So currently our budget, which is being prepared for submission, I believe, is in, I want to estimate at least $7 million for my division alone. But I'm not certain. I don't have the budget number in front of me, but it's millions of dollars.
Yes, I wanted my colleagues to hear that.
I wish I brought the budget sheet. I
No, we would lose
apologize.
$7 million because if we don't get this passed by the first, which is the reason why I was asked before we started why we were having a hearing at 5:30. I needed to get this heard so that I could get the report out.
I
Get it on the floor
apologize.
before the next. No.
Yeah,
it's-
that I don't
it's
have the
not a problem.
specific number, but the funding for our program under the match is 66% to our 34 for every dollar. It's significant, and we need it to run the child support program. So we want to make sure, of course, that we're complying with what our grantors think we should
Okay,
do.
great. And anybody have any questions?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
That's really easy. I was going to say that the current UFSA at Chapter 35 of Title V was done by Public Law 24-183. And when I went back and was doing the research for it, Margot Bean, who was the Child Support Enforcement Director at the time, submitted testimony essentially the same effect, that these laws are important to make sure that we can establish, modify, and enforce child support orders across jurisdictions in a uniform manner. Hence the request that this be adopted verbatim from the way that the amendments were passed.
Does that mean you're going to go to Washington, D.C. to take over the Child Support Division as Margot did?
I don't know. I'll have to ask her when I get a chance to talk to her. What's that route? But for now, I would just like to do my part to improve child support on Guam. So.
Okay, great. If my colleagues have no questions, then this bill is deemed heard, and thank the General for submitting the testimony, and
I will let her know.
I'm glad you guys saw it early enough, soon enough to realize that it needed to be done right away.
Indeed. Some research that I did online has indicated that in other areas of the U.S. and other states, that's not even enacted yet because their legislative sessions run later than January. So, for example, I think I read at least a couple where they're not looking at passage until July, but everybody's under the same deadline, first day of whenever it is.
The next quarter.
Yeah, the next quarter.
Okay.
Okay, thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you very much. The second bill on the agenda was introduced by Senator Nicolas, and I'll have him explain this bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We have the military buildup at our doorstep, and we're expecting the buildup to bring in a significant amount of revenues into the coffers of the government of Guam and spur significant economic activity here on the island. What's going to happen is it's going to cause our revenues to expand, but when the buildup begins to taper off, it's going to also cause our revenues to contract. And the problem with this expansion and contraction when it comes to budgeting for our government is our budget is hardly ever designed to contract. And so Bill 36-33 is intending to make sure that as the buildup benefits our island, we don't put ourselves into a budgetary position that's going to cause us to have a painful event when the military buildup begins to taper off. For example, when we look back in history to our island and we see tourism and the growth that came with tourism, there was eventually a contraction that came at the tail end of the 90s. And the government was not prepared to handle that contraction. And so what happened was we increased our spending levels exponentially as the tourism industry expanded. But when the tourism industry began to slow and when it even contracted for that certain period, the island suffered tremendously. And so while we all anticipate that the military buildup will have a lot of positive economic benefits for the island, if we don't handle the revenues in a way that's going to allow us to be nimble and flexible enough to handle the slowdown or the tapering off of military buildup activity, it will actually lead to a painful event in the future. So Bill 36-33 is intending to create a special fund called the Responsible Guam Buildup Fund. And what this fund will do is it will take military buildup money that is non-recurring, and it will spend it in a way that isn't going to have a permanent liability to the government of Guam. So, for example, when we build the firing range, wherever we build the firing range at, the dollar amount of that firing range is going to generate a certain amount of tax revenue. But we're only going to build one firing range. So that tax revenue that we bring in is only going to be a one-time shot of revenue into the coffers of the government of Guam. So we shouldn't budget and plan to spend as if we're going to continuously receive that revenue over and over again every fiscal year. We should instead spend that money on a one-time expense that's probably going to last us for a significant period of time. So instead of having that $4 million or $6 million more in revenue translate into hiring $6 million worth of people that are going to be 30 years worth of cost to the government of Guam, we're only going to have that $6 million for that one-time shot. This bill will instead put that $6 million from a proposed firing range, for example, into this fund, and it would require that we spend it only in a way that would not have a permanent liability for the government of Guam going forward. And so the way we designed the bill was to allow for the government to have as much flexibility as possible in determining the formula of how they're going to figure out exactly what funds are non-recurring and what funds are recurring, and or allowing the experts to have that flexibility so long as they report to the legislature exactly how they're going to go about doing those calculations. But if we do pass 3633 and it does become law, what we're going to be doing is making sure that our community is going to be spending build-up money in a way that's going to be sustainable. So if the build-up money is recurring and we know we're going to be getting it every year because there's an increase in personnel or there's an increase in sustainable economic activity, then yeah, we can go ahead and budget for that on a recurring basis. But if the certain build-up revenue projects are only going to be non-recurring and they're only going to provide for temporary infusions, this fund will allow us to handle those temporary cash infusions in a way that isn't going to create a permanent obligation for our government. And so I'm hopeful that we can probably get some more feedback from members of the community as to how they feel about us identifying revenues this way and handling it in this fashion. It's patterned after what's done in the private sector, Mr. Chairman. Private companies, whenever they report their earnings, they always have a certain line item there for non-recurring earnings allowances. And so if a company, for example, a private company were to sell a division and that division brought in another $100 million to the company, they wouldn't add that onto they would add it to their earnings per share, but they would put a notation there saying this X amount is going to be non-recurring. So basically that's what we're looking to try to do here for our government, is to provide for a mechanism by which we're not going to be having non-recurring revenue mixed in with recurring revenue and throwing off our ability to project and spend over the long term. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I note the time is 5:45 and there is nobody here to testify, so the committee will leave the record open on Bill 36-33 for 10 days. We will wait. Oh, yes, there is. There was testimony provided by Bureau of Statistics and Plan, which will be included in the bill then.
Can we leave it on the record because we're going to this
Okay. Well, whatever. Okay, yeah, we'll just continue to receive testimony till the end of the week, and we'll see where we're at that point. So the bill is considered heard. Bills 36 and 41 are hereby considered heard. This committee on Appropriations and Adjudication is hereby adjourned.